My name is Richard Ashford. Welcome to Top 10 Emotional Comeback.
When my daughter married a man who only saw dollar signs where love should have been, I knew I had to build something unbreakable to shield her. I never told her what was really hidden in that dusty storage unit across town. My son-in-law, Marcus, always sneered at it with disgust. "Old man, why don't you finally throw out that mountain of trash?" he'd say. He has absolutely no clue that this rusty unit will be the very thing that brings him crashing down. I've survived his twisted games for 3 agonizing years, waiting, watching for this precise moment. The day his carefully laid trap crumbles and the truth finally breaks through into the light. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. 1 year after everything collapsed around us, I'm finally ready to tell you what happened. I'm Richard Ashford. I'm 64 years old, and I've spent most of my life right here in Los Angeles. You know the place. Endless sunshine, palm trees swaying on every corner, where people constantly reinvent themselves, chasing dreams and running from nightmares. That's something I learned the hard way, more painfully than I ever imagined possible. I built my life in this city, raised my precious daughter here after my beloved wife, Elizabeth, passed away 12 years ago. I thought, I really thought I'd prepare myself for whatever life might throw at me. Turns out I had absolutely no idea what was lurking around the corner, waiting to tear everything apart. My daughter's name is Emma. She's 31 now, brilliant beyond measure, with a heart so pure it sometimes scares me. She's the kind of person who sees the absolute best in people, even when she really shouldn't. 3 years ago, she married a man named Marcus Sullivan. God, I remember that wedding like it was burned in my memory yesterday. Everything looked perfect on the surface, didn't it? The venue was stunning, absolutely breathtaking. The flowers smelled like pure heaven. Everyone smiled and posed for those perfect photographs, capturing what looked like joy. I stood there, watching my beautiful daughter glide down that aisle, and I felt something dark twist violently in my stomach. It wasn't joy flooding through me. It was something else entirely, something cold and warning. I didn't say a single word that day. I smiled. I hugged them both. I gave a toast that made people laugh and cheer. But deep inside, I'd already seen something lurking in Marcus's eyes, a way he looked at Emma that wasn't quite right, wasn't quite love. It was possessive, hungry, like she was something valuable he'd acquired rather than someone precious he cherished. At that time, I was already keeping a massive secret. For 12 long years since Elizabeth died, I'd been renting this storage unit downtown. Not because I was some disorganized hoarder or because I didn't have enough room at home. No. I rented it because I desperately needed a place, a fortress, really, where I could keep the things that mattered most safe from prying eyes and grasping hands. Elizabeth's documents, her jewelry, sparkling with memories, the insurance policies that secured our future, the will we'd carefully crafted together, the trust papers that protected Emma's inheritance. Everything that told the real, true story of our family's financial life. Most people thought of that storage unit as just a dumping ground for junk, for things I couldn't let go of. When I'd mention it in casual conversation, I get that look, you know, the kind that said, "Why would you possibly hold on to all that old, worthless stuff?" I let them think that. It was so much easier that way. But the truth? The truth is I'd spent years carefully assembling a fortress of protection for my daughter. Elizabeth and I had done it together before she slipped away from me. We'd created a prenuptial agreement, a family trust structure, a life insurance policy that would flow directly into that trust, bypassing any greedy hands. We'd made absolutely certain that Emma would never be vulnerable no matter what storms came her way, no matter what happened in her life. I never told Emma about any of it. That was the real secret weighing on my heart. When she married Marcus, I made sure she didn't have access to that storage unit. I kept the key with me always, hidden away where no one could find it. I couldn't explain why at the time. Not really, not in words that would make sense. I just felt it deep in my bones, in that place where a parent knows things without knowing how they know. Something about Marcus wasn't right. Something was fundamentally wrong. For the first 2 years of their marriage, I watched like a hawk circling overhead. I had dinner with Emma whenever she'd let me, which became less and less frequent. I called her regularly, though the calls grew shorter, more strained. I noticed small things, tiny details that most people would miss. The way Marcus would smoothly steer conversations toward money, always circling back to finances. The way he'd subtly question her about what I might be leaving her when I died. The way he'd carefully, oh so carefully, discourage her from spending time with me, making excuses, planting doubts. I started keeping notes, just little observations in this leather journal I kept locked in my desk drawer. Nothing fancy, just dates and details, building a picture I hoped I'd never need. Then Jacob called. Jacob Martinez has been my closest friend for 33 years. He's not the type to panic or exaggerate about anything. So when he called me one afternoon, 3 years into Emma's marriage, and told me that he'd overheard Marcus talking to someone about me, about how much my insurance was worth, about how it would all flow to Emma eventually, about how much better things would be if I simply didn't exist anymore, I believed him without hesitation. Jacob isn't a liar, and he wasn't calling to stir up drama or cause problems. He was calling because he was genuinely terrified for me, for Emma, for all of us. That's when everything crystallized for me with perfect, horrible clarity. All those years of silence, all those hidden documents, all the protection I'd built around Emma like invisible walls. It had been for this exact moment. I didn't know it then, sitting there with the phone pressed to my ear, but my entire life's work had been leading to this single conversation with my oldest friend, where he told me that my son-in-law was capable of something truly unspeakable, something evil. I hung up the phone and just sat there in my living room for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I thought about Elizabeth. I thought about the way she'd insisted on that prenup, the way she'd insisted on setting up the trust, the way she'd left me notes, letters I'd found tucked away after she passed that seemed to suggest she knew something I didn't, saw something coming that I couldn't see. She'd written things like, protect Emma with documents, not just words. Protect her from people who would use love as a weapon, as a tool to destroy her. I never fully understood those letters until that very day, sitting alone in the dimming light. And suddenly, like a lightning bolt of recognition, I realized that I'd been preparing for this moment my entire adult life. Not consciously maybe, not with full awareness, but every single decision I'd made, every precaution I'd taken, every secret I kept locked away, it had all been leading here to this crossroads where I had to decide what to do with the terrible truth I'd been carrying like a stone in my chest. I pulled out that leather journal from my desk. I looked at 3 years of careful notes, 3 years of observations and patterns, and I understood finally, clearly, that it was time to stop just watching and start acting with purpose. It was time to open that storage unit and reveal what I'd been protecting all along. It was time to show Emma what I'd been shielding her from. But sitting there in the growing darkness, I had absolutely no idea then how far Marcus was willing to go, how deep his depravity ran, or how much painful truth my daughter would have to face in order to survive him and come out the other side. What I discovered next made my blood run cold. Stay with me. You need to hear what happened when I finally confronted the truth hiding in plain sight. After Jacob's devastating warning, my mind drifted back to the beginning, back to that night when everything started going wrong. It was at Sunday dinner when Emma first brought Marcus home to meet me. I was standing by the stove, stirring sauce, when she walked through the door holding his hand, and I knew it immediately, instantly. It took me exactly 15 seconds to realize this man was different from any boyfriend she'd ever brought around before, and not in any good way. Not at all. Emma looked so happy, radiant. She had that glow people get when they think they've found something real, something special. She introduced Marcus with such pride in her voice, her hand finding his automatically, naturally. They fit together like two puzzle pieces, at least on the surface where everyone could see. But something in the way Marcus looked at her made my skin absolutely crawl with warning. He was handsome, I'll give him that much. Tall, dark-haired, impeccably dressed, The kind of guy who knew exactly how to smile at precisely the right moments and laugh at exactly the right jokes. He complimented the dinner before he'd even tasted a single bite. He asked about my work, about my years in Los Angeles, about the house. All the right questions, perfect timing like he'd rehearsed. But there was something underneath it all, a calculation I could sense even if I couldn't quite name it, couldn't quite put my finger on it. When we sat down to eat, Marcus turned to me with this casual, practiced tone. "This is a beautiful home, Richard. How long have you owned it?" It wasn't a random question, not at all. I'd learned to read people after 64 years on this earth, and I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes like gears in a machine. He wasn't asking because he was genuinely interested in my real estate history. No, he was assessing, calculating, trying to figure out what I was worth and what he might gain from knowing me. 40 years, I answered simply, cutting into my salmon, keeping my voice neutral. Elizabeth and I bought it together when we were young. He nodded, filing that information away like a banker tallying assets in a ledger. Must be worth quite a bit now. LA real estate, right? Always going up, up, up. Emma laughed nervously, uncomfortably. "Marcus, we just got here. Let's enjoy the meal, okay?" But I'd already seen it, clear as day. The way he looked at her when she said his name, like she was a possession he'd already claimed, already owned. It wasn't the look of a man in love. It was the look of a man who decided what he wanted and was methodically, coldly going about getting it. Elizabeth used to talk about this years ago, before she got sick, before the cancer stole her away from us. She'd tell me about people who wore charm like a mask, like a costume they could put on and take off. She'd say, "Richard, real love doesn't need to prove itself constantly. Love doesn't calculate every move. Love doesn't keep score like a business transaction." I remembered those exact words, sitting there at my own dinner table, watching Marcus ask Emma to pass the butter while his eyes stayed locked on me, assessing, measuring, calculating my worth. He asked about my work that night, what I did, how long I'd been doing it, whether I was still active or retired and relaxing. He asked about investments, about whether I traveled much, about whether I had substantial life insurance. That last question caught me completely off guard, though I didn't show it on my face. He framed it casually, mentioning something about his own policy at work, but the timing felt deliberate, calculated. "Everyone should have good coverage," he said, smiling warmly at Emma. "You never know what life throws at you, right? You never know when tragedy might strike." Emma squeezed his hand, completely oblivious to the undercurrent running beneath his words. She was just happy he was getting to know her father, making an effort. To her innocent eyes, this was simply a man meeting her family, asking normal questions. She had absolutely no idea that every single question was a thread he was pulling, carefully mapping out the territory he decided to occupy, to conquer. After dinner, Marcus helped me clear the table, insisted on actually. For a moment, we were alone together in the kitchen, and I felt the weight of his attention shift entirely onto me like a spotlight. It was subtle, just a change in the air, a slight hardening of his expression when he thought Emma couldn't see him. "Richard, you've done really well for yourself," he said, loading dishes into the sink with practiced efficiency. "Emma's lucky to have this kind of security in her life." There it was, right there. Not, "I'm lucky to have Emma." Not, "We're going to build something beautiful together." But Emma's lucky to have security. Like that was the whole point of her existence, her entire purpose, to inherit what I'd built over a lifetime of work. I didn't respond. I just kept rinsing plates methodically and handing them over to him, one after another. Later that night, after they'd left, after I'd waved goodbye from the doorway, I sat in my study with a glass of whiskey burning my throat. Elizabeth's photograph was on the shelf above my desk, the one taken on our honeymoon in Hawaii back when we were young, and everything seemed so beautifully simple. I stared at it for a long, long time. She would have seen what I saw instantly. That immediate recognition of danger lurking beneath charm. She would have known instinctively that Marcus Sullivan wasn't interested in my daughter as a person, as a human being with dreams and fears and hopes. He was interested in what came with her, like accessories to a purchase. The house, the money, the comfortable life I'd built brick by brick. Emma was just the vehicle to get there, the key to unlock the vault. That night, I made a decision that would shape everything that followed. I wasn't going to say anything to Emma. Not yet. Not now. She wouldn't believe me anyway. Not after just one dinner. Not when she was already falling for him hard. And if I spoke up too soon, I'd just push her closer to him, drive them together. I'd seen it happen 1,000 times before. A girl whose father warns her about a boy, and suddenly that girl is absolutely determined to prove everyone wrong, to show them all that they don't understand real love. So instead, I decided to watch carefully, to listen closely, to wait patiently. I pulled out a leather journal from my desk drawer, something Elizabeth had given me years ago, back when she insisted on organizing our finances and planning our future together. I opened to a blank page, the paper crisp and waiting. I dated it carefully. Sunday, first meeting with Marcus Sullivan. Then I wrote down everything I'd observed, every detail still fresh. The questions he'd asked, the way he'd looked at Emma with possession in his eyes, the calculation I'd seen flickering there, the comment about security, all of it, every single thing. I told myself I was just being careful, being protective like any good father would be. But deep down, in that place where we're honest with ourselves, I think I already knew. I think some part of me understood with absolute certainty that this wasn't just a boyfriend who might break her heart. This was a genuine threat, a danger. And I was beginning documentation that would, 3 long years later, become the only thing standing between my daughter and something truly unspeakable, something evil. I should have said something that night, shouldn't I? I should have pulled Emma aside and told her what I'd seen in Marcus's cold eyes. But I didn't. I stayed silent, because I didn't know yet how far he was willing to go, how deep his depravity ran. I only knew I had to watch, listen carefully, and wait for the moment when I need to act. The Real warning came 6 months into their marriage, and what I discovered made me realize I was dealing with something far more dangerous than I'd imagined. The Real warning came 6 months into their marriage, and it was subtle, so incredibly subtle that Emma didn't even see it happening right before her eyes. But I did. I saw everything. It started with a question Marcus asked her one evening, a question designed to plant seeds of doubt. Emma called me, and her voice sounded different, confused, wounded, uncertain. She asked if we could talk, and I knew immediately that something fundamental had shifted. "Dad, Marcus thinks I should know more about the family finances," she said carefully, like she was walking through a minefield. "He says it's weird, really strange, that I don't know anything about your money. He thinks you're keeping secrets from me, important things I should know." I felt something cold settle deep in my chest, spreading like ice water. This was Marcus's move, perfectly executed, calculated and cruel. But I kept my voice steady calm. "What did you tell him, sweetheart?" "I told him I didn't really think about it much," Emma said, and I could hear the confusion in her voice. "But now I'm wondering, Dad, why haven't you told me about your finances? It does seem kind of strange when I think about it, doesn't it?" Of course it seemed strange to her now. Marcus had made Emma question me without ever having to voice a direct accusation himself, without getting his hands dirty. He'd planted a seed of doubt about her own father, letting it grow in the darkness. But that wasn't even the worst part of what was coming. A week later, Emma called me again. This time, she was genuinely upset, her voice shaking. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I really need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course, honey," I said, my heart sinking. "What's going on?" "Marcus says that Jacob has always had feelings for me," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice. "He says Jacob told him directly that he thinks our marriage is a mistake, that it's wrong. He says Jacob wants to break us up because he's still in love with me after all these years." I went completely still, frozen. Jacob, my oldest friend, the man who'd been part of my family for 3 decades, who'd watched Emma grow up, who loved her like a niece. Marcus was lying to my daughter about him, poisoning that relationship with calculated malice. And she was believing it. "Emma, that's not true," I said firmly. "Jacob would never, ever do that. You know him. You've known him your whole life." "How do you know that for sure, Dad?" she asked, and now there was defensiveness creeping into her voice. "How do you really know what Jacob says when you're not around? How can you be certain?" The question landed like a physical punch to my gut. She was actually starting to doubt Jacob now, This man who'd been there for every birthday, every milestone, every important moment of her life. Marcus had successfully taken one of the most important relationships in her life and poisoned it completely with an elaborate lie. And Emma, being good-hearted and trusting, was starting to believe it. "Marcus has no reason to lie to me," she said, and I could hear her trying to convince herself. "He barely even knows Jacob. Why would he possibly make something like that up? What would he gain?" Because Marcus was systematically isolating my daughter. That's why. He was deliberately cutting her off from the people who might protect her, who might see clearly what he was doing, who might warn her about the danger. And he was doing it so cleverly, so skillfully, that Emma couldn't even see it happening right in front of her. Over the next few weeks, I watched helplessly as Emma pulled away from Jacob. She didn't return his calls as quickly. She made excuses when he invited us both to dinner at his place. And worst of all, absolutely worst of all, I could see the doubt in her eyes when she looked at him now, doubt that Marcus had carefully, meticulously planted there like poison seeds. This was the moment I really understood what I was dealing with, the true nature of the threat. Marcus wasn't just some gold digger looking for an easy score, a quick payday. He was something far more dangerous, far more calculated. He was methodical and strategic. He understood psychology in a way that most people never couldn't do. He knew exactly how to manipulate my daughter, not through force or obvious aggression, but through seeds of doubt and carefully crafted lies that grew in the darkness. One night, I sat in my study and pulled out that journal, the one I'd started after that first Sunday dinner that had set off alarm bells. I flipped past my initial observations about Marcus's probing questions, his calculating eyes, his comment about security. Those had seemed ominous at the time, but they were nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to what I was witnessing now. I wrote down everything with shaking hands. The conversation Emma had reported about Marcus questioning my finances. The elaborate lie about Jacob that was destroying a lifelong friendship. The way Emma was starting to pull away from my oldest friend, from me, from everyone who truly cared about her. The isolation tactics happening in real time, like watching a trap slowly close. And as I wrote, something crystallized in my mind with horrible clarity. This wasn't just about money, though money was certainly a huge part of it. This was about control, absolute, total control. Marcus wanted to control Emma completely. Her mind, her relationships, her entire sense of reality. He wanted to make absolutely sure that when the moment came where she needed someone to tell her the truth, to save her, there would be no one left to turn to. Her father would seem like he was keeping suspicious secrets. Her best friend would seem like he had ulterior motives, hidden agendas. And Marcus would be the only person she could trust, the only one who understood her. It was a master class in psychological manipulation, a textbook case, and it was happening to my daughter in real time while I watched helplessly. That night, I made another decision. I wasn't going to confront Marcus directly. I wasn't going to try to convince Emma that he was lying, because I'd learned enough about manipulation to know that would only drive her closer to him, push them together. Instead, I was going to document everything meticulously, every lie, every manipulation, every calculated move he made. I was going to build a record that would eventually show Emma the truth in a way she couldn't deny. I started writing in that journal every single night without fail. I'd note down conversations Emma had mentioned. I'd record my own observations in detail. I'd track the timeline of when Marcus made particular moves, what he said, how Emma reacted. It was methodical, painstaking work, the kind of work that required infinite patience and focus. At the time, I didn't know exactly why I was doing this with such dedication. I didn't have a specific plan laid out. I just knew in some deep part of myself, in my bones, that I was going to need this evidence eventually. That someday, in some way I couldn't yet imagine, my daughter would need to see the truth laid out in black and white, undeniable. And when that day came, when she was ready, I wanted to be ready too. I had absolutely no idea then that Marcus's isolation tactics were just the beginning, just the opening moves. I had no idea that the next 3 years would involve so much more than psychological games and careful lies. I had no idea what he was truly capable of, how dark things would become. But that night, I made a choice that would define everything that followed. I would watch with unwavering attention. I would document everything meticulously. And when the time came, and I was starting to believe that time would come inevitably, I would be ready to protect my daughter no matter what it cost me, no matter what I had to sacrifice. But Marcus's next move was something I never saw coming, and it would force me to take action sooner than I planned. I drove to the storage unit the next morning, hands gripping the steering wheel, and pulled out that old leather journal. It had been sitting there for 12 years, untouched, waiting. I'd bought it years ago, thinking maybe I'd write about the time I spent with Elizabeth, preserve those memories. I never did. Now I opened it to the first blank page, and the leather was soft, worn in places from age. I uncapped a pen and looked at the empty page in front of me. For a moment, I just sat there in that climate-controlled storage unit, surrounded by boxes containing pieces of my life, trying to figure out how to begin this dark journey. I dated the first entry, May 15th, 2021. Then I wrote, Emma seemed distant today. Marcus must have said something to her. Can see it in her eyes. That was how it started. One observation, one sentence. But I knew even then that this journal would become something crucially important. So I committed to it completely. Every week, I'd come to the storage unit and write down what I'd seen, what I'd heard, what I'd noticed in Emma's behavior. By June, the entries had become more detailed, more specific. June 3rd. Watched Marcus touch Emma's arm when she laughed too hard at something I said. She was happy, genuinely happy. He didn't like that at all. The touch wasn't affection. It was a signal, a warning, a subtle reminder that he was there watching, controlling even her moments of joy. July 12th, Emma stopped mentioning her college friends entirely. Marcus made her choose, him or them. She chose him. She always chooses him now. It breaks my heart. August 8th. Marcus said to Emma, your father doesn't understand us. He's too old to see what we have. And I watched my daughter nod in agreement. I watched her accept that I was the enemy, that he was the only one who truly cared about her future. The pattern started to emerge clearly around September. It wasn't random. It wasn't occasional moments of jealousy or insecurity. It was systematic, methodical, deliberate, and cruel. September 20th. Marcus insisted Emma's yoga class was a complete waste of money. She didn't even argue. She just accepted it without question. I'm starting to see the bigger picture now. It's not just about money or control over time. It's about erasing her sense of self, her identity. Every no he gives her, every decision he makes for her, every opinion he corrects, it's all part of the same sinister pattern. October 5th. I overheard Marcus on the phone today. He was talking about Emma's future, about inheritance, about how much better their life would be when her old man was gone, when I was dead. Those were his exact words, when the old man's gone. I felt something cold move through my entire chest. October turned into November, and the pattern became impossible to ignore, undeniable. I filled page after page with observations, dates, specific moments that told a horrifying story. Marcus controlled what Emma wore, criticizing her choices. He controlled who she saw, vetoing friends. He controlled how much money she had access to, monitoring every purchase. He controlled her schedule, her phone, all her relationships. But was more than that, deeper than that. He controlled the narrative, the story she told herself. He controlled what she thought about me, about Jacob, about herself, and her own worth. He told her I was keeping secrets, hiding things. He told her Jacob wanted to destroy their marriage out of jealousy. He told her she was lucky to have him, that no one else would ever love her like he did, that she was fundamentally flawed. November 15th. 3 patterns clearly established now. First, isolation. Marcus has successfully cut Emma off from everyone who might protect her. Second, financial control. He knows every dollar she has, tracks every expense. Third, psychological manipulation. He's completely rewired how she thinks about the people who love her most. November 28th. But there's a 4th pattern emerging, and this one scares me the most. Marcus is asking more questions about my life, my work, my insurance policies, my assets. This isn't just about loving my daughter anymore. This is about something else entirely, something dark. By December, I'd filled almost 200 pages. 200 pages of observations, dates, times, specific quotes that painted a terrifying picture. 200 pages documenting the careful, calculated way Marcus was dismantling my daughter's independence piece by piece and replacing it with complete dependence on him. I sat in the storage unit on December 15th, 2021, and read through an entire year of entries from beginning to end. The pattern was unmistakable. It was clear as crystal. It was undeniable to anyone who could read. Marcus wasn't a boyfriend who'd gotten a little too controlling, who loved too much. He wasn't a husband with normal jealousy issues. He was something far more calculated, far more dangerous. He was a predator, and he was following a specific playbook that he'd likely used before and would likely use again on another victim. The isolation had happened first, slowly and carefully. Then the financial control, tightening gradually. Then the psychological manipulation, rewiring her reality. And now the targeting, the pointed questions about my money, the comments about how much better things would be when I was gone, when I was dead and buried. I didn't know where this was heading exactly. I didn't know what Marcus was truly capable of in the end. But as I sat there in that cold storage unit, surrounded by 3 years of evidence, surrounded by proof, I understood something with complete certainty, with absolute clarity. I was watching a pattern unfold in real time, a pattern I'd seen before in textbooks, in news stories. And I had no idea how it would end, how dark it would get. But I knew one thing absolutely, with every fiber of my being. I knew that I had to be ready for whatever came next, whatever horror was approaching. Because patterns like this, patterns of control, of isolation, of psychological destruction, they don't stop on their own. They don't reach a plateau where the person gets comfortable and decides that's enough. No, patterns like this escalate inevitably. They intensify and grow darker and more dangerous with every passing month, every passing day. And I had a sinking feeling deep in my gut that the worst was still to come, that we hadn't seen the bottom yet. 3 years. That's how long I watched and documented. 3 years of family dinners where Marcus smiled and played the perfect son-in-law for everyone. 3 years of filling that leather journal with his escalating behavior. 3 years of staying silent because I didn't have enough proof to make anyone believe me, to make it real. It wasn't easy, God knows. Those 3 years were a study in restraint, in patience, in absolute control. Every Sunday dinner, every phone call, every time Emma mentioned something Marcus had said or done, I had to bite my tongue so hard it bled. I had to smile and pretend everything was fine while documenting the slow destruction of my daughter's life in that journal locked away in the storage unit where no one could find it. Marcus became bolder as time went on, more confident. The isolation deepened into something suffocating. By year 2, Emma had virtually no friends left at all. Marcus had systematically poisoned every relationship with elaborate lies, with manipulation. He told her that her college friends were jealous of her marriage, of what they had. He said her work colleagues were trying to manipulate her for their own gain. He convinced her that everyone wanted to see them fail, wanted to tear them apart. And Emma believed him completely. She believed every word. Then came the moment that changed everything. The moment I realized Marcus wasn't just destroying Emma's life. He was planning to end mine. The control over money intensified dramatically too. By the 3rd year, Marcus had taken over her paychecks completely, every penny. She couldn't buy a coffee without him knowing about it, questioning it. When she asked why, when she dared to question this arrangement, he'd say it was because they were building a future together, and trust equals transparency, Emma. It sounded almost romantic when he said it, didn't it? But it was control, pure and simple. Total domination. I watched Emma become smaller and smaller. The light in her eyes dimmed gradually like a flame dying. She laughed less and less. She questioned herself constantly. When she came to my house for dinners, which became less and less frequent over time, she seemed like a shadow of the daughter I'd raised, a ghost of who she used to be. And the bruises started appearing in year 2. The first one was on her arm, purple and ugly. She said she'd fallen, clumsy her. The next was on her hip, a car door, she claimed nervously. Then there was a bruise on her thigh that she said came from bumping into the bed frame in the dark. Each time there was an explanation, a story. Each time it sounded more implausible than the last, more rehearsed. But Emma delivered these stories without hesitation, like Marcus had carefully rehearsed them with her beforehand, coached her. Then came the bruises on her face, impossible to hide. A misunderstanding with the door, she said. A clumsy moment at home, she explained. Stories that didn't hold up to any scrutiny whatsoever, but which Emma delivered with the conviction of someone who'd been told to believe them, who'd been broken down until she accepted these lies as truth. Every time I saw a new bruise, something inside me wanted to explode violently. I wanted to grab Emma and physically drag her away from him. I wanted to call the police immediately. I wanted to do something, anything to stop what was happening to my daughter right before my eyes. But I couldn't. Not without proof that people would believe, that would hold up. I'd seen this before, studied it. The more the father intervenes forcefully, the more the daughter defends her abuser. The more we try to save them, the more they cling desperately to the person hurting them. It's a horrible cycle. So I did what I could do, the only thing available to me. I documented everything. I wrote down dates meticulously. I recorded observations in detail. I filled that journal with evidence, page after page after page, year after year. I was building a case that I hoped desperately I wouldn't need to use. Jacob stayed present during those 3 long years. He'd call me regularly, checking in. He'd mention how worried he was about Emma, how scared. He noticed things too. The isolation, the fear in her eyes that never quite left, the way Marcus always had his hand on her somewhere, always maintaining physical contact, always reminding her he was there watching. "Richard, something's terribly wrong," Jacob said to me more than once, his voice heavy with concern. "I can feel it in my bones. This isn't normal. This isn't love." I knew he was absolutely right. But what could we do without concrete proof? What would we say that wouldn't backfire horribly? By year 3, I'd filled nearly 800 pages. The journal was thick, heavy with my observations, my fears, my documentation of Marcus's systematic abuse. I had dates. I had times. I had direct quotes. I had a timeline showing the escalation from psychological manipulation to physical violence, step by terrible step. But I still couldn't move, couldn't act. Not yet. Not without the right moment. The worst part was watching Emma defend him, because that's what happens when someone is being abused like that, when they're that broken down. They protect their abuser. They make excuses for him. They blame themselves when he hurts them. It's a survival mechanism. I try to reach out gently. "Emma, how are you really doing, sweetheart?" I'd ask during our rare phone calls. "I'm fine, Dad. Everything's great," she'd say in that flat voice. "Marcus just wants the best for us. He's so protective of me." Protective. That's what she called the cage he'd built around her, the prison with invisible bars. 3 years of watching helplessly, 3 years of waiting for the right moment, 3 years of knowing that something had to give eventually, but not knowing what I could do to make it happen without destroying everything, without losing her forever. And then one afternoon, Jacob called me. His voice was different, serious, urgent in a way I'd never heard before in 3 decades of friendship. "Richard, we need to talk," he said breathlessly. "I need to see you today, right now, because I saw something, and I think you desperately need to know about it." My heart dropped into my stomach. I've been waiting for 3 years for something to shift, for something to change. I've been documenting everything, preparing for the moment when I'd need to act. But I'd never expected it to come from Jacob like this. "What did you see?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Not over the phone," Jacob said firmly. "We need to meet in person immediately. And Richard, I think it's worse than we thought. Much worse." Those words changed everything in an instant. Because Jacob had finally seen what I'd been documenting all along. He'd finally witnessed something so undeniable that he couldn't look away anymore, couldn't pretend. After 3 years of silence, after 3 years of watching and waiting and preparing, someone else had finally seen the truth with their own eyes. And I realized that everything I'd been doing, all that documentation, all that patience, all that careful recording of evidence, it had all been leading to this moment, this phone call, this shift in reality, the moment when everything was about to change forever. I met Jacob at a small cafe near my house 20 minutes later. He looked worried in a way I recognized immediately. It was the same expression I'd been wearing for 3 years, etched into my face. He was already sitting at a corner table when I arrived, a cup of coffee in front of him that he wasn't drinking, just staring at. His hands were folded tight, like he was trying to hold something in, contain it. When he saw me, he stood up, and we embraced, the kind of hug that only happens between men who've known each other long enough to drop all pretense. "Richard," he said, sitting back down heavily. "Thank you for meeting me so quickly." "Of course," I said. "What's going on, Jacob?" "You sounded urgent on the phone, scared." He took a deep breath, and I watched him gather his thoughts. For a moment, he just looked at his coffee like the answers were floating there. Then he started talking, and what he said made my blood run cold. "I've been trying to help Emma," he said quietly, painfully. "For months now, I've tried to reach out to her, to let her know I'm here if she needs me, that I'll always be here. But every time I try, she pushes me away hard. And I finally understand why now." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew the answer, felt it in my bones. "Marcus has told her things about me," Jacob said, and pain crossed his face like a wave. "He's convinced her that I have ulterior motives, that I've always had feelings for her romantically, that I'm trying to come between them because I'm jealous. And she believes him, Richard. She actually believes that I'm the bad guy in this situation." I nodded slowly, my jaw tight. This was exactly what I documented in my journal, the systematic poisoning of Jacob's relationship with Emma. But hearing it from Jacob himself, seeing the hurt in his eyes, made it real in a way that my written observations couldn't capture. "That's not all," Jacob continued, and his voice dropped lower. "Richard, I've been paying closer attention lately, watching more carefully, and I'm seeing things that absolutely scare me. Emma looks diminished, smaller, like a version of herself that's shrinking every day. And the way Marcus watches her, the way he controls every single interaction she has, it's not love. It's something else entirely, something dark." "I know," I said quietly. "I've known for a long time." Jacob looked up at me sharply. You know? You know." I didn't answer immediately. I just looked at him, this man who'd been my friend for 33 years, who'd always been there for me, who'd kept showing up for Emma even when she pushed him away, even when it hurt. I made a decision in that moment. "Jacob, I need to tell you something," I said carefully, "and I need you to listen without interrupting until I'm completely finished." For the next 20 minutes, I told him everything. I told him about the journal in detail. I told him about the 3 years of documentation. I told him about the dates, the observations, the escalation from psychological manipulation to physical violence. I told him about the bruises and the lies Emma told to cover them up. I told him about the isolation and the financial control and the way Marcus had systematically dismantled my daughter's sense of self, her identity. When I finished, Jacob was silent for a long time. His face had gone pale, almost gray. 3 years, he finally said, his voice hoarse. "You've been documenting this for 3 years, and you never told me?" "I needed proof," I said simply. "I needed to know I wasn't imagining things. I needed to have something concrete before I tried to convince anyone else." "Why didn't you tell me?" Jacob asked, and there was hurt in his voice, deep hurt. "I could have helped. We could have done this together. Because I didn't want to drag you into something you couldn't fix," I said honestly, meeting his eyes. "And I wasn't sure if it was safe. I wasn't sure who Marcus might try to manipulate or threaten next. I was trying to protect you too." Jacob shook his head slowly. "Richard, you should have told me anyway. We could have done this together from the start. You shouldn't have had to carry this alone for 3 years." "I know," I said, my voice cracked. "I know that now." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then he leaned forward intently. "What do you need from me? Tell me what you need." "I need your help," I said. "Emma won't believe me anymore. She thinks I'm keeping secrets from her, that I don't understand her marriage. But she might believe you. She might listen to you in a way she won't listen to me." "I'll do whatever it takes," Jacob said immediately, without hesitation. "Whatever you need, Richard. I'll watch him. I'll gather evidence. I'll be there for Emma. Whatever it takes to save her." "There's more," I said, and my voice dropped to barely a whisper. I think Marcus might be planning something bigger, something terrible. I heard him mention my life insurance specifically. I heard him talk about how much better things would be when I was gone, when I was dead. Jacob, I think he might be planning to hurt me, to kill me. Jacob's face hardened into something I'd rarely seen. Then we need to move faster, he said firmly. We need to get Emma away from him before this escalates any further, before it's too late. Agreed, I said. But we have to be careful. We can't just confront him directly. We need to be strategic about this. We need to make sure Emma understands what's happening before we take action, so she doesn't run back to him. Okay, Jacob said, and I could see the determination settling into his features like steel. Then let's do this properly. Tell me everything, every detail, every observation in that journal. We're going to build a case so airtight that Emma won't have any choice but to see the truth clearly. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could actually breathe. I wasn't alone anymore. Someone else knew. Someone else understood. Someone else was willing to fight for my daughter. Tell me in the comments, would you have waited 3 years like I did, or would you have acted sooner? And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Jacob and I spent the next 3 hours at that cafe, going through my documentation in detail, reviewing the timeline meticulously, discussing strategy. We talked about how to approach Emma, how to present the evidence in a way that wouldn't make her defensive, how to protect her if Marcus reacted badly when he realized he was losing control. And as the afternoon light shifted through the cafe windows, I realized something fundamental had changed forever. I'd spent 3 years watching and documenting in complete isolation. But now, with Jacob beside me, I understood that this fight wasn't mine alone to fight anymore. We were in this together. 2 men who loved Emma deeply. 2 men who'd finally decided that the time for documentation was over, that the time for action was beginning. Because now there were 2 of us who knew the truth, who'd seen the pattern. And that changed everything. Marcus had no idea what was coming for him. He had no idea that his carefully constructed house of lies was about to come crashing down around him. And when it did, when the truth finally came to light, when Emma finally saw him for what he really was, a predator, a manipulator, an abuser, there would be nowhere left for him to hide. 3 years of patience. 3 years of documentation. 3 years of waiting for this exact moment. And now, finally, it was time.